I was watering my roses when I heard my son Michael telling his wife Sarah that I had 30 days to pack my things and move to Sunset Manor. They were standing in my kitchen, planning my future while living in the $2.3 million villa I built with my own two hands 40 years ago. What they didn't know was that 3 months earlier I'd already transferred everything to my estate lawyer, and the real surprise was just beginning. You won't believe what I did next. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. The water from my garden hose kept running over the yellow roses Elena had planted before she died 2 years ago. I could hear every word through the open kitchen window. Sarah's voice was sharp, impatient. "Frank needs professional care, Michael. He's becoming a liability." "I know," my son replied, and I felt something cold settle in my chest. Sunset Manor has an opening next month. The sooner we get him settled, the sooner we can start the renovations. Renovations. On the house I built from nothing when Michael was just 5 years old, the house where Elena and I raised him, where we celebrated his graduations, where we held him when he cried, where she took her last breath while he was too busy to visit. I turned off the hose and moved closer to the window, staying hidden behind Elena's climbing vines. My hands weren't shaking anymore. They hadn't shaken in months, not since I'd started planning. "The real estate agent says we could get $2.8 million if we update the kitchen and add that master suite extension," Sarah continued. "With Frank's medical expenses, we'll need every penny." Medical expenses. I was healthier than most men half my age. I still did my own yard work, managed my investments, and drove myself to the grocery store twice a week. The only thing failing was my patience with their lies. "What about Emma and Josh?" Michael asked. "The kids are attached to Grandpa Frank. They'll adjust. Besides, they need their own space. Josh is almost 18, and Emma needs a bigger room for her art supplies." My granddaughter Emma, the only one in this house who still looked at me like I was a person instead of an obstacle. She'd be crushed when she found out what her parents were planning, but I had a feeling Emma was stronger than they realized. She was Elena's granddaughter, after all. "Have you talked to Lisa about this?" Michael asked, referring to his sister who lived in Oregon with her family. "I called her yesterday. She thinks it's the right move. Said she can't help financially from so far away, but she supports whatever decision we make." Of course Lisa supported it. She hadn't visited since the funeral, hadn't seen how Michael and Sarah had slowly taken over every aspect of my life, how they'd moved back into my house 6 months ago after Michael's temporary job loss became permanent, how Sarah had gradually started making decisions about my meals, my schedule, my doctor appointments. I walked back to my roses, my mind clear and calm. They thought they were so clever, planning my life while I watered my garden like some confused old man who couldn't hear them plotting 20 feet away. But I'd been hearing everything for months, recording most of it too. 30 days, I whispered to Elena's yellow roses. They gave me 30 days. That evening at dinner, Michael cleared his throat and put on his serious face. The same expression he'd worn when he was 8 years old and had broken Elena's favorite vase. "Dad, Sarah and I have been talking, and we think it might be time to consider some changes around here." I kept eating my meatloaf. The recipe Elena had taught Sarah before she got too sick to cook. Sarah had stopped making it, Elena's way, months ago. "Too much work," she said. "What kind of changes?" I asked, though I already knew every word they were about to say. Sarah leaned forward, her voice taking on that patronizing tone she used when she thought she was being gentle. "We're worried about you living alone in such a big house, Frank. What if you fell? What if something happened and we weren't here?" "You are here," I said simply. Michael and Sarah exchanged a look. They'd been doing that a lot lately. These silent conversations over my head like I was a child or a problem to be solved. "The thing is, Dad, we can't stay indefinitely. I need to get back to work and the kids need stability." "I see." That was all I said. Just, "I see." But something in my tone must have worried them because Michael started talking faster, his words tumbling over each other like water from a broken dam. "There's this place called Sunset Manor. It's not a nursing home, Dad. It's assisted living. You'd have your own apartment, your own kitchen, they have activities, other people your age, you might even enjoy it. How much does it cost? I asked. Don't worry about that right now. We'll figure out the finances. With my money, of course. The money I'd earned breaking my back in construction for 40 years. The money Elena and I had saved and invested so carefully, the money they'd already started spending. I'd like to see this place, I said. Relief flooded Sarah's face. Of course, we can drive up there this weekend. You're going to love it, Frank. It's right by the lake, and they have these beautiful gardens. Gardens, like the one Elena and I had spent 20 years creating together. Like the roses I still watered every morning while talking to her about my day, about how much I missed her laugh, about how our son had become someone we wouldn't recognize. That sounds nice, I told them, and watched them smile at each other like they'd just solved the world's most complicated puzzle. Later that night, I sat in my study looking at the documents Margaret Chen had prepared for me 3 months ago. My estate attorney, a sharp woman in her 50s who specialized in cases like mine, had listened to my concerns with the kind of professional sympathy that told me I wasn't the first elderly person to walk into her office with this particular problem. The irrevocable trust was already established. Every asset, every account, every stock certificate had been transferred months ago. Michael's name had been removed from everything except one small checking account that I'd left accessible just to see what he'd do. He'd been stealing from it for 2 months now. Small amounts at first, 50 here, 100 there. Last week, he'd taken $800. Margaret's investigator had documented every transaction. I pulled out the folder of recordings I'd been collecting. Hours of conversations between Michael and Sarah, discussing my deteriorating condition, my confusion, my growing dependence, planning their future in my house with my money while talking about me like I was already dead. Tomorrow I would call Margaret and tell her it was time to move to the next phase. Tonight I would sit in Elena's chair and remember when Michael was 7 years old and had cried because a bigger kid at school had taken his lunch money. Don't worry, Mijo, I told him then. Bullies always get what's coming to them. Sometimes you just have to be patient. I was done being patient. But I wasn't done being careful. Elena had always said I was too trusting, too willing to see the best in people even when they showed me their worst. She'd been right about a lot of things, but she'd been especially right about that. This time I was going to be smarter. This time I was going to think 3 steps ahead. The next morning I made coffee the way Elena had taught me, and sat at the kitchen table reading the newspaper while Michael and Sarah whispered in the living room. They thought I couldn't hear them, but the house had excellent acoustics. I'd designed it that way. He seemed to take it well last night, Sarah was saying. Maybe this won't be as hard as we thought. He's been different lately, Michael replied. Quieter. More, I don't know, accepting? If only they knew how accepting I'd become, how peacefully I'd accepted that my son was not the man Elena and I had raised. How calmly I'd accepted that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most are the ones who hurt you the deepest. But acceptance, I was learning, didn't mean surrender. I folded my newspaper and walked outside to check on Elena's roses. They were blooming beautifully this year, better than they had since she died. Maybe they could sense that justice was coming. Maybe they knew that soon, very soon, the people who had forgotten how to respect the hands that fed them were about to learn a lesson they'd never forget. 3 months earlier I'd been a different man. Lonelier, sadder, still mourning Elena's death and grateful that Michael had moved back home to help me through the grief. I'd welcomed Sarah and the kids with open arms, happy to have family around again, happy to feel useful and needed. That was before I noticed the jewelry missing from Elena's dresser, before I found the credit card statements for accounts I'd never opened, before I overheard Sarah telling her sister on the phone that I was getting senile and they were just trying to help me manage my affairs. The first time money disappeared from my checking account, I thought it was a mistake. The bank error, maybe, or my own confusion. I was 73, after all. Maybe I was starting to slip. But Elena had raised me better than that. Trust your gut, Francisco, she used to say. It's usually right, even when your heart wants it to be wrong. So I'd started paying attention. Really paying attention. I'd started writing things down. Dates, times, conversations. I'd started checking my accounts daily instead of weekly. I'd started listening when Michael and Sarah thought I was napping or watching television. What I discovered broke something inside me that I didn't think could break anymore. My son, my only boy, the child Elena and I had poured our hearts into raising, was systematically stealing from me. Not just money. He was stealing my dignity, my autonomy, my right to live in my own home on my own terms. And his wife, the woman we'd welcomed into our family, the mother of our grandchildren, was encouraging him, pushing him, making plans for my future like I was a piece of furniture they needed to move out of storage. That's when I'd called Margaret Chen. Now 3 months later, I had everything I needed. Bank records, recordings, witness statements from neighbors who'd noticed Sarah telling people I was confused and not managing well on my own. I had documentation of every missing item, every unauthorized withdrawal, every lie they'd told about my mental state. But more than that, I had something they didn't expect. I had patience. I had time. And I had the knowledge that comes from 73 years of life, 47 years of marriage, and 2 years of grief that had taught me exactly how strong I really was. They wanted to put me away like an old dog who'd outlived his usefulness. They wanted to take the house Elena and I had built together and turn it into their dream home. What they were about to learn was that old dogs sometimes have very sharp teeth. And sometimes when you corner an old dog in his own house, he doesn't run away. Sometimes he fights back. The weekend visit to Sunset Manor went exactly as I'd expected. Sarah gushed over the charming apartments while Michael discussed payment plans with the administrator. I played my part perfectly. The confused, grateful old man who was just happy that his loving family was taking such good care of him. "This is lovely," I told them, looking out at the small balcony that overlooked a parking lot. "Very nice. See, Dad? I told you you'd like it. And look, they have activities every day. Bingo on Tuesdays, movie nights on Fridays." Bingo! Elena and I had traveled to 37 countries together. We'd built a business from nothing. Raised a family, survived the death of our parents and most of our friends. And my son thought I'd be satisfied with bingo. "When would I move in?" I asked. "Well, they have an opening on the 15th, Sarah said quickly. "That gives us 2 weeks to get everything arranged." "What about my things?" "Oh, don't worry about that. We'll help you pack everything you need. The apartment comes furnished, so you won't need much." Won't need much. 40 years of marriage, 73 years of life. And I won't need much. "What about Elena's roses?" I asked. Michael and Sarah exchanged another one of their looks. "Dad, you can't take a garden with you. But think about it. No more yard work. No more worrying about watering and pruning. You can just relax." Relax. While they tore up Elena's garden to put in a swimming pool or a tennis court or whatever other improvement would increase their property values. "I suppose you're right," I said, and watched them both exhale in relief. On the drive home, I listened to them plan my exit from my own life. Sarah would handle the packing. Michael would arrange the movers. They'd already spoken to a real estate agent about staging the house for maximum market appeal. "We should probably repaint the master bedroom," Sarah said. "That wallpaper is so outdated." The wallpaper Elena had chosen for our 40th anniversary. The soft blue pattern she'd loved because it reminded her of her grandmother's house in Mexico. "And we'll definitely need to update the kitchen," Michael added. "Those cabinets are original to the house." The cabinets I'd built with my own hands during the summer Michael turned 10. The summer he'd helped me sand and stain them, proud to be working alongside his father. "What about Grandpa's workshop in the garage?" Emma's voice came from the back seat, and I heard something in it that made me pay attention. "We'll clear it out," Michael said dismissively. "Probably just a bunch of old tools anyway." Old tools. The tools I'd used to build half the houses in this neighborhood. The tools Elena had bought me for Christmas and birthdays over the years, each one chosen with care and love. The tools I'd been planning to pass down to Michael back when I thought he'd want something more meaningful than my bank account. "Can I keep some of them?" Emma asked. I like working with my hands. Honey, you don't need a bunch of dirty old tools cluttering up your room, Sarah interrupted. We'll get you proper art supplies instead. I caught Emma's eye in the rearview mirror. At 16, she had Elena's eyes and Elena's stubborn chin. She was looking at me with something that might have been understanding or maybe just sympathy. Either way, it was more than I was getting from her parents. That night, I called Margaret. It's time, I told her. Are you sure, Frank? Once we do this, there's no going back. I'm sure they've made their choice. Now they get to live with the consequences. All right. I'll file the papers tomorrow morning. Detective Ruiz will need to interview you next week about the financial theft. Are you prepared for that? I've been prepared for months. Frank, Margaret's voice softened slightly. I want you to know that what you're doing isn't cruel, it's survival. You have every right to protect yourself and your assets. I know. Elena would have done the same thing, probably sooner. Your wife sounds like she was a smart woman. The smartest. She always said the hardest thing about being a parent is knowing when to stop protecting your children from the consequences of their own choices. Well, it sounds like Michael is about to learn what those consequences look like. After I hung up, I sat in Elena's chair and tried to remember the last time Michael had asked me about my day, my health, my feelings about anything other than moving to Sunset Manor. I couldn't. When had he stopped seeing me as his father and started seeing me as an obstacle? When had Sarah stopped pretending to care about my opinions? When had my own house started feeling like enemy territory? It didn't matter now. What mattered was that in less than 24 hours they were going to discover that the confused, helpless old man they'd been manipulating for months was a lot sharper than they'd realized. And a lot less forgiving than they deserved. I woke up before dawn and made coffee, then sat at the kitchen table with my phone and my notebook, waiting. At exactly 9 o'clock I dialed Michael's cell phone. Hey Dad, what's up? I need to talk to you and Sarah, both of you, in the living room. Something in my tone must have alerted him because his voice changed, became cautious. Is everything okay? Everything's fine. I just have some things I want to discuss. I heard him talking to Sarah in the background, though he'd covered the phone. When he came back, his voice was overly cheerful, the way you'd talk to a child who might throw a tantrum. Sure, Dad. We'll be right down. They came into the living room together, Sarah carrying her coffee mug and Michael looking slightly annoyed at being interrupted from whatever they'd been doing upstairs, probably planning more renovations. I waited until they were both seated, then pulled out my phone and set it on the coffee table between us. I want to play something for you, I said calmly. Dad. What? I pressed play. Sarah's voice filled the room, sharp and clear. Frank needs professional care, Michael. He's becoming a liability. Michael's response, I know. Sunset Manor has an opening next month. The sooner we get him settled, the sooner we can start the renovations. The color drained from both their faces. But I wasn't done yet. I let the recording play for another minute. Through Sarah's comments about real estate values and Michael's discussion of my medical expenses. When I finally turned it off, the silence in the room was deafening. Dad, I can explain, Michael started. No need to explain. I heard everything perfectly clearly. I pulled out another phone, an older model they didn't know I had. This one has recordings from last Tuesday when you discussed forging my signature on some insurance documents, and this one, I produced a third device, has your conversation with Lisa about how I'm losing my grip on reality. Sarah's coffee mug was shaking in her hands. Frank, you don't understand. We were just trying to help me. Is that what you were doing when you stole $800 from my checking account last week? Or when you sold Elena's diamond earrings and told me I must have misplaced them? Michael stood up abruptly. Dad, you're confused. You gave Sarah those earrings, and I borrowed that money. I was going to pay it back. Sit down, Michael. Something in my voice made him comply immediately. Good. It had been a long time since my son had shown me any respect, but fear would work just as well. I have bank statements showing unauthorized withdrawals going back 4 months. I continued. I have documentation of every piece of Elena's jewelry that's mysteriously disappeared. I have recordings of you telling people that I'm senile, incompetent, and unable to manage my own affairs. I reached into my shirt pocket and pulled out a business card. Detective Carlos Ruiz from the Elder Abuse Unit will be here tomorrow morning to discuss the criminal charges that are being filed against both of you. Sarah's mug slipped from her hands and shattered on the hardwood floor. Elena and I had refinished together our 3rd year in the house. The coffee spread in a dark stain across the wood, and neither Michael nor Sarah moved to clean it up. They were both staring at me like they'd never seen me before. Maybe they hadn't. "You can't be serious," Michael whispered. "I'm very serious. But that's not even the interesting part." I leaned back in my chair, Elena's chair, and looked at my son the way I'd looked at him when he was 5 years old and had lied to me about breaking the neighbor's window with his baseball. The interesting part is that 3 months ago I transferred all of my assets into an irrevocable trust. The house, the bank accounts, the investment portfolios, the life insurance policies, everything. You have no claim to any of it. Sarah made a sound like she was choking. "That's impossible. You can't just—" "I can, and I did. Margaret Chen, my estate attorney, filed all the paperwork in March. You remember Margaret, don't you, Sarah? You met her at Elena's funeral. Nice woman, very thorough." Michael was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. "Dad, you can't do this. This is our home too. The kids will be fine. Emma and Josh are smart, good children. They'll survive having parents who have to actually work for a living instead of stealing from elderly relatives." "We weren't stealing." Sarah's voice was shrill now, desperate. "We were helping you manage your finances. By opening credit cards in my name, by selling Elena's jewelry without my knowledge, by planning to commit me to a nursing home so you could steal my house." I stood up slowly, feeling every one of my 73 years but also feeling stronger than I had in months. "Tomorrow morning, Detective Ruiz will explain the charges you're facing. Fraud, elder abuse, theft, conspiracy. Margaret will explain why you need to be out of this house by the end of the week." Michael lunged toward me, his face twisted with rage. "You can't throw us out. We have nowhere to go. You should have thought of that before you decided I was disposable." "Dad, please. I'm your son. I'm your only son." And there it was. The plea I'd been expecting, the manipulation I'd been waiting for. The same tone he'd used when he was 8 years old and wanted me to fix something he'd broken. But I wasn't the same man who'd fixed all of Michael's broken toys and covered for his childhood mistakes. That man had died slowly over the past 6 months. Killed by 1,000 small betrayals and the devastating realization that his child had grown up to be a stranger. "Yes," I said quietly. "You are my son, and that's what makes this so heartbreaking." I walked past them toward the kitchen, stepping carefully around the broken coffee mug and the spreading stain. "Clean that up," I said, without turning around. "It's still my house for now, and Elena's floor deserves better than your carelessness." I spent the rest of the day in my workshop organizing tools and trying not to think about the frantic whispers coming from upstairs. Sarah made several phone calls, her voice high and panicked. Michael slammed doors and threw things. Emma came home from school and asked me quietly if everything was okay. "Everything's going to be fine, Misha," I told her, using Elena's pet name for her. "There are going to be some changes around here, but you and Josh will be taken care of." "What kind of changes?" I looked at my granddaughter, so much like Elena with her dark eyes and stubborn chin, and made a decision. "Your parents are going to have to move out. They've been making some very bad choices and now they have to face the consequences." Emma nodded slowly. "I know they were taking your money, Grandpa. I saw the bank statements on Dad's desk." "Smart girl." Elena would have been proud. "What's going to happen to us?" "You and Josh will stay with your Aunt Lisa for a while. I've already called her. She's driving down this weekend to get you." "What about you?" I smiled. The first real smile I'd managed in months. "I'm going to stay right here and take care of Elena's roses." That evening Michael tried one more time. "Dad, I know I screwed up. I know I made mistakes. But you can't destroy my whole family over this. We were standing in the kitchen. The same kitchen where just days before I'd overheard him planning to ship me off to Sunset Manor. The same kitchen where Elena had taught him to make tortillas when he was 12, where she'd bandaged his scraped knees and listened to his teenage heartbreaks. I'm not destroying your family, Michael. You did that all by yourself. Sarah and we were under so much stress. I lost my job, we had bills. The kids needed things. We weren't thinking clearly. You were thinking clearly enough to research nursing homes. You were thinking clearly enough to open credit cards in my name. You were thinking clearly enough to tell people I was losing my mind. He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made my chest ache. What do you want from me? I'll pay back every penny. I'll get counseling. I'll do whatever it takes. What I want is for you to understand that trust, once broken, can't be repaired with promises and apologies. So that's it? You're just going to cut me off forever? Your own son? I looked at him for a long moment. This man who had my eyes and Elena's smile but none of the values we'd tried to teach him. I will always love the boy you were, Michael, but I can't save the man you became. He left the kitchen without another word. An hour later I heard him and Sarah arguing upstairs, their voices carrying through the old house like ghosts of better conversations. Tomorrow Detective Ruiz would arrive. Tomorrow the legal consequences would begin. Tomorrow they would start facing the reality that actions have consequences and parents are not infinite resources to be exploited. But tonight I sat in Elena's chair and remembered the Michael who used to help me in the garden, who used to ask me about my day, who used to hug me goodnight and tell me he loved me. That boy had been real once. Elena and I had raised him with love and values and the belief that family meant protecting each other, not preying on each other. Somewhere along the way that boy had disappeared and been replaced by a man who saw his aging father as nothing more than an obstacle to his inheritance. I mourned that boy. I would always mourn him, but I refused to be victimized by the man he'd become. Detective Carlos Ruiz arrived at 8 o'clock sharp the next morning, a serious man in his 50s with kind eyes, and the patient manner of someone who'd spent years dealing with family tragedies. Michael and Sarah sat on the living room couch like defendants at trial, which, in a way, they were. I sat across from them in Elena's chair, calm and prepared. Mr. Martinez has provided extensive documentation of financial abuse, Detective Ruiz explained, his voice professional but not unkind. Unauthorized use of credit cards, theft from bank accounts, sale of personal property without consent. These are serious charges. Sarah started crying. We weren't trying to hurt him. We were just trying to help manage his affairs. By lying to his neighbors about his mental state, by researching nursing homes without his consent, by stealing his late wife's jewelry. Michael spoke up, his voice defensive. We're his family. We were protecting his interests. Whose interests were you protecting when you took $800 from his checking account last week? Detective Ruiz asked mildly. The questioning continued for 2 hours. Michael and Sarah's stories kept changing, contradicting each other, falling apart under gentle but persistent pressure. I said very little, just confirmed facts and provided additional documentation when asked. When Detective Ruiz finally left, promising to be in touch about next steps, Michael turned to me with desperate eyes. Dad, this is insane. You're going to send your own son to jail? I'm not sending you anywhere, Michael. Your choices sent you there. I'm just refusing to cover for you anymore. Margaret Chen arrived an hour later with an official eviction notice and more papers than Michael and Sarah could read in a week. She was all business, but I caught her giving me approving looks as she explained their legal situation. You have 72 hours to vacate the premises, she told them. Mr. Martinez has been generous in allowing you additional time to arrange temporary housing. This is our home, Sarah protested. Our children live here. This house belongs to the Esperanza Trust, established by Mr. Martinez in March of this year. You are no longer welcome residents. What about our things, our furniture? You may take personal belongings, and any furniture you can prove you purchased. Everything else remains with the property. I watched my son and daughter-in-law absorb this information, saw the exact moment when they realized they'd lost everything they thought they were entitled to. It should have felt like victory, but mostly it just felt sad. "Dad," Michael said one last time, his voice barely above a whisper, "I'm sorry. I'm really, truly sorry." "I know you are," I replied. "But sorry doesn't undo 6 months of betrayal. Sorry doesn't give me back the sense of safety I used to feel in my own home. Sorry doesn't resurrect the son I thought I raised." That afternoon, I called Lisa and arranged for Emma and Josh to fly to Oregon the following weekend. Then I called Maria Santos, a home companion Margaret had recommended, and asked if she was available to start the following week. By evening, the house felt different. Quieter. The tension that had been building for months was finally breaking, and in its place was something that felt almost like peace. I spent the evening in Elena's garden, watering her roses and talking to her the way I had every day since she died. "They're gone, mi amor," I told the yellow roses she'd loved most. "It's just you and me again the way it should be." The roses nodded in the evening breeze, and I chose to believe that meant Elena approved. 2 months had passed since Michael and Sarah moved out, and I was finally beginning to understand what peace felt like again. Maria Santos had started working 3 days a week, helping with housework and providing companionship without the underlying tension of people who were counting my money while pretending to care about my welfare. Emma called every Sunday from Oregon. She was doing well in school, had joined the art club, and was helping her Aunt Lisa with her youngest cousin. Josh was playing soccer and making new friends. They would visit for Christmas, Lisa had promised, and I was already planning what gifts to put under the tree. The house felt like mine again. I'd changed the locks the day after Michael and Sarah moved out, not because I thought they'd try to break in, but because I needed to know that every person who entered my home was there by my invitation. I'd started cooking again. Recipes Elena had taught me during the first months after her diagnosis when she was determined to make sure I could take care of myself. The kitchen smelled like cumin and garlic, instead of the processed foods Sarah had preferred. I ate dinner at the table Elena and I had picked out together, instead of standing at the counter like a visitor in my own home. Detective Ruiz called every few weeks with updates on the case. Michael and Sarah had both been charged, though they'd managed to avoid jail time by agreeing to pay restitution and perform community service. Michael was working construction again, living in a studio apartment across town. Sarah had moved back to her mother's house with the kids until they left for Oregon. "Your son asks about you sometimes," Detective Ruiz had told me during his last call. "Wants to know if you'd be willing to meet with him." "What do you think?" I'd asked. "I think that's entirely up to you, Mr. Martinez. Some bridges can be rebuilt, others are too damaged to support any weight." I'd thought about that conversation for days afterward. Part of me missed my son, missed the man I'd thought he was, missed the relationship I'd believed we had. But a larger part of me remembered the cold calculation in his voice when he'd discussed putting me in Sunset Manor, the casual cruelty of planning to erase Elena's garden, the complete lack of respect for the life and home I'd built. Emma had asked me about it during one of our Sunday calls. "Do you think you'll ever forgive Dad?" "I already have forgiven him, Misha. Forgiveness isn't about him. It's about me not carrying anger in my heart. But forgiveness doesn't mean trust. And it doesn't mean allowing someone back into your life to hurt you again. I miss the way things used to be," she'd said quietly. "I know, I miss them too. But sometimes the way things used to be was built on lies we didn't know we were telling ourselves." Now, sitting in my garden on a warm October afternoon, I found myself thinking about the man I'd been 6 months ago. Lonely, grieving, so grateful for family that I'd ignored the warning signs Elena would have spotted immediately. She'd always been better at reading people than I was, better at protecting herself and the people she loved. "You would have seen through them from the beginning," I told her roses, which were blooming one last time before winter. "You would have stopped this before it started." But Elena wasn't there to protect me, so I'd learned to protect myself. It wasn't the lesson I'd wanted to learn at 73, but it was the lesson life had given me. Maria knocked on the doorframe of the sliding glass door that led from the kitchen to the patio. "Mr. Frank? There's someone here to see you." My heart jumped for a moment, thinking it might be Michael, but when I walked through the house to the front door, I found Emma standing on my porch with a small suitcase and a nervous smile. "Surprise, Grandpa." I asked Mom if I could spend fall break with you instead of staying in Oregon. I looked past her to see Lisa getting out of a rental car parked in my driveway. She waved and walked over, looking uncertain. "I hope this is okay, Dad," she said. And I realized she was nervous about seeing me. Emma really wanted to visit, and I thought maybe it was time I saw how you were doing. Lisa, my daughter who lived 2,000 miles away and called once a month but had supported Michael's plan to put me in a nursing home because it was easier than getting involved. Lisa, who looked so much like Elena that seeing her sometimes made my chest ache. "It's more than okay," I told them both. "It's wonderful." That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with my daughter and granddaughter sharing the dinner Maria had helped me prepare. Lisa apologized for not visiting sooner, for not seeing what Michael and Sarah were doing, for assuming they were taking good care of me because it was convenient to believe. "I should have been here," she said. "Mom would have expected me to be here." "Your mother would have expected you to learn from this and do better in the future," I replied. "She was big on second chances as long as the person was willing to change." Emma helped me show Lisa around the house, pointing out the improvements I'd made, and the things that were exactly the same as when Elena was alive. We looked through photo albums and talked about memories. Lisa told me about her kids, her job, her husband who wanted to meet me properly this time instead of just at funerals. "The house feels peaceful," Lisa observed as we sat in the living room after dinner. "I was worried it would feel sad or empty, but it doesn't." "It took some work to get it back to feeling like home," I admitted. "But yes, it's peaceful now." "Do you think you'll ever talk to Michael again?" It was the question everyone kept asking. The question I kept not answering because I didn't know the answer myself. "Maybe someday, if he ever becomes the man your mother and I raised him to be, if he ever shows that he understands what he did and why it was wrong, if he ever cares more about making amends than about what he can get from me." "That's a lot of ifs," Emma said quietly. "Yes, it is. But that's his choice to make, not mine. I've learned that I can't force people to be better than they choose to be." Lisa stayed for 3 days, helping me organize Elena's closet and going through boxes of old papers in the garage. She found photo albums I'd forgotten about, letters Elena had written to me during our courtship, report cards from when the kids were small. "Look at this," she said, holding up a construction paper card Michael had made me for Father's Day when he was 8. "World's best dad" written in crayon with a stick figure drawing of the two of us working in the garden. I took the card and looked at it for a long moment. The little boy who had made this card had loved me completely, had been proud to be my son, had believed I was the best father in the world. "He was such a sweet kid," Lisa said softly. "Yes, he was. That's what makes this so hard. I keep looking for that little boy and the man he became, but I can't find him anymore. Maybe he's still in there somewhere. Maybe. But I can't spend the rest of my life trying to resurrect a ghost while ignoring the reality of who he is now." When Lisa and Emma left, I felt sad but not devastated. For the first time in months, I had hope that my family wasn't completely broken, just rearranged. Lisa promised to visit again at Christmas, with her whole family this time. Emma would spend part of her summer vacation with me, helping in Elena's garden and learning about her grandmother she barely remembered. It wasn't the family I'd planned on having in my old age, but it was real and honest and based on mutual respect rather than financial exploitation. That night, I sat in Elena's chair and thought about the conversation I'd had with Margaret Chen earlier in the week. The Esperanza Trust was working exactly as we'd planned. My assets were protected, my future was secure, and the people who had tried to take advantage of me would never be in a position to do so again. But more than that, I had something I'd lost during those dark months. When Michael and Sarah were systematically dismantling my sense of security, I had peace. I had dignity. I had the knowledge that I was stronger than I'd realized and smarter than they'd assumed. Elena would have been proud. 6 months later, spring had returned to Elena's garden. The roses were budding early and I'd planted new flowers in the spaces where Sarah had let Elena's favorites die from neglect. Maria had suggested adding a small herb garden near the kitchen window, and I'd discovered a surprising talent for growing cilantro and tomatoes. Emma was planning to spend the summer with me, and Lisa called twice a week now instead of once a month. Josh would visit for a few weeks in July, and Lisa's family would come for a long weekend in June. I joined a support group for elderly people who'd experienced family financial abuse, and I was surprised to learn how common my situation was. Margaret Chen had introduced me to the group, saying I might be able to help other people navigate the legal and emotional complexities of protecting themselves from exploitative relatives. It turned out I was good at listening to other people's stories and helping them understand that protecting yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary, that love doesn't mean allowing yourself to be victimized. That family members who truly care about you don't steal from you or lie about your mental capacity or plan to warehouse you in institutions for their convenience. Michael had sent a few letters over the months, apologizing and asking for another chance. The letters were manipulative and self-serving, focused more on what he'd lost than on the harm he'd caused. I'd stopped reading them after the third one. But Emma had told me that he was attending counseling and working steadily, trying to rebuild his life and his relationship with his children. She didn't push me to forgive him or contact him, which I appreciated. She just reported the facts and let me draw my own conclusions. "Do you think he's really changing?" I'd asked her during one of our phone calls. "I don't know, Grandpa. He says he is, but he's said that before. I think maybe he's learning what it feels like to lose everything, and maybe that's teaching him things he didn't know before." Smart girl. Elena's granddaughter, definitely. On a warm Tuesday morning in May, I was working in the garden when I heard a car door close in my driveway. I looked up to see Michael walking slowly toward me, looking older and thinner than he had 6 months ago. I stood up carefully, my 74-year-old knees protesting, and waited. "Hello, Dad." Michael. We looked at each other across Elena's flower bed, two men who shared blood and history but not trust. He looked nervous, uncertain, nothing like the confident man who had planned to ship me off to Sunset Manor. I was wondering if we could talk. About what? About the fact that I destroyed the most important relationship in my life because I was selfish and stupid and scared. I set down my gardening tools and gestured toward the patio chairs Maria had helped me arrange near Elena's roses. "All right, let's talk." We sat down, and for a long moment, neither of us spoke. Michael looked around the garden, taking in the new plantings and the obvious care I'd been putting into Elena's legacy. "The garden looks beautiful, better than it has in years. Your mother would be pleased." "Dad, I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness. I know what I did was unforgivable. But I need you to know that I understand now what I put you through. I understand what I almost took from you." I waited. Elena had taught me that when someone is trying to apologize, the best thing to do is listen completely before responding. I've been going to counseling. Not because the court ordered it, but because I needed to understand how I became the kind of person who could steal from his own father, who could look at the man who raised him and see nothing but a source of money. "And what have you learned?" "I learned that I was angry at you for still being alive when Mom died. I was angry that you got to say goodbye to her and I didn't. I was angry that you had this house and this money and this life that felt stable when my life was falling apart." It was more honesty than I'd expected from him, and more self-awareness than he'd shown in years. I learned that I convinced myself you were becoming incompetent because it was easier than admitting I was becoming desperate, that I told myself I was protecting you because I couldn't face the fact that I was stealing from you. And Sarah was scared. We were broke, facing bankruptcy, and when we moved back here and saw how much you had, it felt unfair, like you were hoarding resources while your family struggled. I offered to help with your job search. I offered to pay for training programs. You said you didn't need charity. I know, I was too proud to accept help, but not too proud to steal. That doesn't make sense, does it? No, it doesn't. Michael was quiet for a moment, looking at his hands. I want you to know that I'm not here to ask for money, or to ask you to change your will, or to ask for anything except the chance to maybe, someday, earn back a small part of your respect. What does that look like to you? I don't know. Maybe it looks like me visiting once a month and helping with yard work. Maybe it looks like me being the kind of man Mom raised me to be, even if it's 20 years too late. Maybe it looks like me being a father my children can respect, even if I can't undo the damage I did to their grandfather. I studied my son's face, looking for signs of manipulation or calculation. What I saw instead was exhaustion, genuine remorse, and something that might have been hope. The counselor says I may never understand why I was willing to destroy our relationship for money. I didn't even need that badly. She says some mistakes are too big to fully comprehend. You just have to live with the consequences and try to do better. Your counselor sounds wise. She is. She also said I shouldn't expect forgiveness, and I shouldn't make my recovery dependent on whether you're willing to trust me again. We sat in silence for a few minutes, listening to the bees working Elena's roses and the distant sound of children playing in a neighbor's yard. Michael, I want you to understand something. I forgave you months ago, not because you deserved it, but because I needed to let go of the anger for my own peace of mind. He looked up at me with something like surprise. But forgiveness doesn't mean trust. Trust has to be earned over time through consistent actions, not just words or intentions. And I may never be willing to take the risk of trusting you completely again. I understand. Do you? Because what I'm telling you is that even if you do everything right from now on, even if you become the man Elena and I raised you to be, our relationship will never be what it was before. Some damage can't be undone. I saw him absorb this, saw him accept it in a way that felt real rather than performative. I understand. And I accept that. I just want the chance to be your son in whatever way you're comfortable with instead of being a stranger who happens to share your DNA. It wasn't the conversation I'd expected to have with Michael, but it was the conversation we needed to have. Raw, honest, free from manipulation or false promises. You can visit once a month, I told him. You can help with yard work. You can call and check on me, but you cannot ask me for money. You cannot ask me about my will or my finances, and you cannot expect more intimacy than I'm willing to give. Thank you. And Michael, if you ever lie to me again, if you ever try to take advantage of me again, if you ever make me feel unsafe in my own home again, it will be the last conversation we have. Do you understand? Yes, sir, I understand. He left an hour later after helping me plant new rose bushes in Elena's memory. We worked mostly in silence. But it was comfortable silence, the kind Elena and I had shared during our 47 years of marriage. When he was gone, I sat in Elena's chair and thought about second chances and the difference between forgiveness and reconciliation. Michael might become trustworthy again someday, or he might not, but either way, I was safe. My future was secure, my home was my own. And Elena's roses were blooming more beautifully than they had in years. That evening, I called Emma and told her about Michael's visit. How do you feel about it, Grandpa? Cautiously hopeful, I said. But not dependent on hope. I've learned the difference. What's the difference? Hope is wanting things to work out. Dependency is needing them to work out. I want your father to become the man he's capable of being, but I don't need him to for me to be happy. That sounds very wise. Your grandmother taught me that. It just took me 74 years to really understand what she meant. 1 year later, I stood in Elena's garden on the anniversary of her death, surrounded by the roses she'd planted and the new flowers I'd added in her memory. The garden had never been more beautiful, and neither had my life. Michael had kept his word. He visited once a month, helped with yard work, and slowly began to rebuild trust through consistent actions rather than empty promises. We would never have the relationship we'd had before, but we were building something new, more honest, more respectful, based on reality rather than assumptions. Emma was thriving in college, studying art therapy and planning to specialize in working with elderly people who'd experienced family trauma. She spent part of each summer with me, learning about Elena's garden and helping me document family history for future generations. Lisa and her family had visited twice, and we'd talked about the possibility of them moving closer when her husband retired in a few years. The grandchildren I barely knew were becoming real people to me, funny and smart and interested in their grandfather's stories. The support group had evolved into something more like a community organization. We'd helped 3 other elderly people navigate legal protection from exploitative family members, and Margaret Chen had started referring clients to our informal network of survivors. But more than any of that, I had peace. I woke up each morning in the house. Elena and I had built together, tended the garden she'd loved, and made my own decisions about my own life. No one was stealing from me, lying about my mental capacity, or planning my future without my consent. I'd learned that love doesn't mean allowing yourself to be victimized, that family bonds don't excuse betrayal, and that protecting yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary for survival and dignity. Most importantly, I'd learned that it's possible to rebuild your life at any age, to choose peace over resentment, and to create new forms of love even after old ones have been broken. Emma called that evening, as she did every Sunday. "How are Elena's roses doing, Grandpa?" "They're beautiful, Misha." "She would be so proud." "I think she'd be proud of you too." "I hope so. I think I'm finally becoming the man she always believed I could be." As I hung up the phone and prepared for bed, I looked around the house that was truly mine again, safe, peaceful, filled with memories of love rather than echoes of betrayal. Elena's picture smiled at me from the mantel, and I could almost hear her voice saying what she'd said so many times during our marriage. "Well done, mi amor. Well done." Tomorrow I would wake up and tend her roses, call my granddaughter, maybe work on the memoir I'd started writing about rebuilding life after loss. I would live another day as a free man in his own home, protected by his own choices, surrounded by people who loved him without trying to exploit him. It wasn't the life I'd planned, but it was the life I'd chosen. And that, Elena would have told me, made all the difference. If you like this story, please like this video. Subscribe to the channel and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left.